Welcome.
Bonjour.
Vous écoutez le podcast Dirty Feet sur les ondes de No More Radio.
You're listening to the Dirty Feet podcast on the No More Radio Network.
Nous sommes vos animateurs,
Et animatrices.
We are your hosts, Allison Burns.
JD Papillon.
Et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
Listen in.
Écoutez.
We're gonna move you.
This week's episode of Dirty Feet Podcast is coming to you from Edmonton, Alberta. I am currently sitting in the Mile Zero Dance Studio here with Gerry Morita, who is the artistic director of the company here, and we're going to be talking a bit about herself and about Mile Zero Dance and the incredible things that they're doing here in Edmonton and beyond. Gerry, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for coming all the way out here just for this.
It's my pleasure. It's already been worth it. So I would love to start by talking about you and your artistic history. You come originally from Saskatchewan, and you studied dance at the Simon Fraser University, and you've performed and worked all over the place, including Vancouver, Montreal, here in Edmonton, in Tokyo, in Turkey. So let's talk about what kind of artistic practice you have as working a lot with contact improvisation and somatic work. Where did you start after Simon Fraser?
Well, right after Simon Fraser, even in my last term, I was really involved with EDM. So that's Peter Bingham and the Contact Improv Company there. And I was really attracted to the form of contact and equally to pure improv and site-specific work. And I've really continued with those things. And yeah, I worked at EDM for about a year before moving to Montreal. And then Montreal really opened up my ideas about what contemporary dance could be in a good way. Compared to Vancouver at that time, it was kind of restrictive. And yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about who you were working with in Montreal for our Montreal listeners who might recognize?
I was really based in Studio 303 and the people in the milieu around there. I knew Paul Caskey back from Simon Fraser days, and Miriam, who I worked with quite a lot, and she danced with me in a couple of things. And that whole format of really combining arts, which was also big at Simon Fraser with their Center for the Arts really having an interdisciplinary focus, I found that 303 was able to continue bringing other artistic sensibilities into dance and bringing other artists and audience to dance that I still think is really important and keeps dance from being too small and inward and sort of incestuous.
I'm sensing some foreshadowing now as we're going to be speaking about Mile Zero a little bit later and similar values there.
We all have sex with each other constantly.
Great. So then you've done tours as well. So tours through Canada, tours through Turkey. In what context were these? Were these independent projects? Were these working for companies?
Most of the work I've done has been independent or self-driven or small collaborations, either with other dancers or with other artists. I just don't have it in me to be a company dancer. And even being like a freelance dancer, I found really, really compromised my values as a human too much. And I would just absorb the choreographer's energy and neuroses way too much. So, yeah, most of my work has been very self-driven. When we went to Turkey, that was with a lighting designer I was working with who started a dance festival at his university in Ankara. And it had kept going for 10 years and became this like international dance festival. And so I just had a little project I was working on with his lights. And a lot of it has come along like that. Like I haven't been receiving massive touring dollars. I just go places that something comes up, and it's usually connected in a very personal way. It's not like a producer or presenter phoning me up. It's like a friend who's like, hey, you should come to my town. So I worked a lot with Hideo Arai in Tokyo and Mari Osanai, who's in northern Japan. And when I lived over in Japan for 4 years, I worked with those guys studied Noguchi Taiso, which is very, it's like a precursor to Buto, but it's got different ethical values behind it. Noguchi is it's a pure form. You try to be a water bag, and at the same time you try to dispel all negative energy and tension in the world. As opposed to Buto, which is the dance of darkness, which gives you permission to get very dark and dirty. And so I found studying Noguchi really to be a good base technique that I keep going back to, even though I don't study it all the time anymore.
I imagine this interdisciplinary passion also comes into your work. Does that happen through you seeking out other art forms that you can involve? Does that come through collaborating with people from different fields?
It comes from a lot of collaborative efforts, and I guess for me, dance is never really enough because I'm a contact dancer. I can just go jam and have fun and have a community and hang out anytime I want and be done with it. Like, why does dance need to be performed and seen by an audience? I find those to be really opposing things that I'm always dealing with. So I try to approach dance as a full sensory experience for audiences, and that involves looking at other art forms and how they involve the senses in different ways.
And then how do you go about finding the people that you want to work with?
I hold international auditions that are always open. No, it's just random. It's just who I meet. I'm really kind of social in that way. And if I see somebody whose work I really like, I'll, approach them and ask them if they want to do something. And because I'm able to do paperwork, I find that I'm often the person initiating, funding and, setting things up. And I can get things happening in a small way, like not in a huge way, but I can generate enough money to hire people that I like, which is really fun. Like Wendy McNeil was a musician who used to live here. Now she lives in Sweden. And she was trained as a dancer for a few years and then went into like accordion and songwriting. And we did this 2-year collaboration. It was just really bizarre. The kind of thing that you don't have the chance to do all the time, like to work with somebody over a long period of time with really merging aesthetics and having those collisions that happen on the way, but going through it artistically. And I find that kind of work really invigorating, and I think it's more fun than having the Wizard of Oz creative genius thinking of everything themselves.
And then commissioning somebody to create an element for the work.
Yeah. I like to dive in with other people that are willing to get in early. As an improviser and collaborative artist, if you ever want to be the hero, all you need to do is show up at the end and add your touch of genius, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's so perfect. How did you think of it? And it's like, well, because everyone else did the homework. So getting in, in the early stages is harder in some ways, but I think you get more of a combined result that's not, over-directed.
And not something you could have conceived of necessarily from the get-go, something unique.
Yeah, you never know. And I'm pretty open. No, I'm not. I can be very autocratic too, but I tend to have a very flowing way of working. I don't have a lot of preconceptions until I reach my aesthetic limits, and then it's like absolute no, or else like it's a big challenge point. Yeah. So I'm quite open to what other people bring.
Mm-hmm. And then that's also that kind of contradiction between the art for the sake of the art and the art for the audience. When you find that point where you have to start considering that, or yeah,
because I can always go jam and touch other people anytime I want and be happy. Like, why go through the torture of going through an artistic process for a niche market of people, which dance is, unless you're really like digging into something that's artistically important.
Mm-hmm. So is it important to you then that your work has an impact on people, and what is your ideal impact?
Well, it's been really interesting in Edmonton because Edmonton's not, it's not Montreal. Like, there's not a dance scene, like the dance scene, like you've talked to us all now pretty much.
Yes, I've had the pleasure of speaking with Jake Hasty from Toy Gun Dance Theatre and Ainsley Hillard from Good Women Dance. So I'm moving through the Edmonton
and then
dance
a lot of the older companies, like Brian is the last sort of survivor, but there's, been generations of people who've come and gone, got old, disappeared, and there's no institutional memory here. So it's a very non-dance focused place to work, I put it that way. And so the audiences that we receive at shows are not necessarily dance audiences, they're Mile Zero audiences, and they've been following our work and my fetishes for a number of years. And some of these people who come out, like, we're just their community. We're just a place they can go that's safe and warm and has some really weird, unexpected things happening all the time. I think that impact is just as important as, impressing a 15-year-old girl who does lots of pirouettes and then she suddenly realizes that she can also roll on the floor. That's fun too. But the impact on everyday people who, might be social misfits, or they might be lonely, or, not artistically inclined at all, who manage to come out to a show and it becomes a part of the social fabric of their lives. Like, I think that's more important over long term now than, having an impressive 5-star show that gets a good review from a newspaper that's going to maybe exist for another year.
Awesome.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm so excited to get to talking about the Dirt Buffet Cabaret, which is one such event that you're talking about with this community that you've created for Mile Zero. But before I get there, I would love to paint a better picture of Mile Zero Dance itself. So Mile Zero Dance has been around for 20 years before you got involved?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been established in Edmonton for a while. Can you tell us a bit about the founders?
So, not really. I don't know much. So Deborah Shantz and Andrea Rubinovich were the co-founders, and Andrea is now general manager at Maskell Dance in Vancouver, and she's a hip-hop teacher. And Deborah kind of stopped doing dance completely, and they were both gone before I got here. And the company was originally set up as kind of the first job for grads of the Grant MacEwan dance program. So they would do school tours and shows with like the recent grads before they moved on.
So this current vision of Mile Zero, is that your influence, the more 303 like multidisciplinary with workshops and community building?
The company has a really clear and yet open mandate, so it really does allow me to do whatever I've wanted with it and easily achieve the mandate. Because we're in a city that doesn't offer a lot of contemporary dance, we find ourselves doing, like, we used to use dance labs similar to Le Groupe La Place Royale's format, and yeah, we've done lots of other things that in a larger city, one company would just do one of those things, but we do like 12. So in a way, we're always overextending, but in another way, it's like just trying to give the community something that's needed. And as soon as there's another company that can provide those things, it's really easy to pass it off then.
Yeah, because you also offer support to artists, emerging artists. You offer these events for, very easy participation for people.
Yeah.
And again, classes and workshops and lots going on.
We've done a salon series off and on, which is very similar to the Dirt Buffet. It's like a 303 vernissage, but then it kept getting bigger and bigger, and we were doing it in 200-seat theaters. And what happened was the costs of production got so high that we weren't able to do them as often. And taking it back down to the studio level and holding a monthly event. Well, we're doing 2 monthly events now. I find that that's more impactful for the arts community to have a circulation for people to try new ideas in front of a public, as opposed to presenting their package.
Can we talk about your transition into becoming artistic director after working with Mile Zero Dance for a couple of years?
It was a pretty quick transition. Basically, the artistic director left. I was artist in residence for a period of time. And then Bobby Todd was artistic director, and she moved to Calgary. And when she moved, there was about a 6-month crossover period where I was learning things, and then it was like, boom, just thrown into the fire.
This scaling back down of the production to this more monthly, more beneficial to the community event, in my mind kind of parallels what you were speaking about before, about being more interested in that community offering with art than the 5-star newspaper review. How do you see the company evolving, or what does the company need to maintain to keep that kind of support for the community here in Edmonton?
That's a really difficult question. Like, our activity is based around space. It is so hard to get decent dance space in this city. And we were renting out large theaters and competing with every theater company in town for those times. And then when we moved here in March...
We're here in Little Italy.
To this space, yeah. So we had a really, a very nice energy space before, but it was super cheap and kind of crappy, and we couldn't do any evening events. And when we got this space, it's like, okay, everything is going to happen here because it's costing us so much money. We're not going to rent any outside spaces. And so, in a way, the space dictates how we enact the mandate because of just nitty-gritty financial reasons. I would be just as happy like dancing on bridges for a year and like floating around, but it just feels like, to have a space, you have to hold it. And to hold the space, you have to fill it with art.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of filling it with art, you've got a mural on one wall of the studio. It's just not something you could do if you got a floating space.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that's just because we couldn't afford the paper.
You were also telling me before we started about the lighting in here, and this concept for performance lighting that's less about performance lighting and more about lighting.
Right. Well, we're all working on a shoestring now because even though Justin has taken over, it's going to take him a few years to fix the damage that's been done. So it's like we're still living in conservative climate for at least another year or two, right? And so how do we spend more of our money on art and artists and less of our money on like electricians and rentals and stuff like that? So we're trying to set up the space instead of being a black box, which dancers are used to, feels very safe and comfortable. Trying to set it up more like a white box so that it's equally accessible to like video artists, film people, stand up, visual artists. Like in the front, we're setting up the front space, which is visible from the street to be viewed from the street. So we've done some performing inside that little box, and people set up chairs outside and watch. And so the lighting is more like gallery lighting, just track lights with really bright halogens that are focusable. And then that way we don't have somebody like working the lighting board, creating magic. It's more like the magic has to come direct from the artist. And it's just, like you can still make magic. It's just you don't have as many technical means to do so.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
It's not that magic is cheating. It's just the magic is in the performer first and foremost. And because we have a limited amount of budget, we want to make sure that the artist gets as much of it as they can. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just not even feasible. Like when we went for our main stage show last year, we used a theater that had a proper lighting grid and everything, and we didn't use any of their stuff. We didn't use their sound system. We didn't use their lights. Like we brought in our chandeliers and we brought in record players and all of our own stuff, and it was all controlled by the performers on stage. Just because it's not just revealing, like opening up the side curtain and showing like, oh, there's a backstage. It's like the whole stage and backstage is completely combined and equal, and we're improvising often as well, and like we're making things in front of you, and you get to see not just the mechanism, but you get to see the junk and like the messiness of it and the obstacles and even like danger that it creates. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's an aesthetic in itself.
Yeah. It's like after years and years and years of seeing like black marley, side lights, black background, ooh, floating dancer, it's just like, our whole lives we're surrounded by crap and objects, whether they're like special or not. And the only way you can have an empty room to dance in is if you're in a dance studio or on a dance stage. And I was like, that doesn't relate to me as a human. Like we're surrounded by crap all the time. And objects and like changing clothes. Like it just, I guess it's closer to like a European post-dramatic theater sort of mentality where the amount of stuff that we have in our lives is reflected in the space.
And you're human first and a dancer second?
Yeah, and a dancer isn't an ideal human. It's not an ideal. It's not like a heavenly thing. Like I would have kept doing ballet if I believed that.
And as far as I understand, a lot of the workshops that you offer inclusivity as well.
Yeah. So when I went to Tokyo, I went there to study with Saburo Teshigara, who's the director of Karas. And he is so amazing. And I managed to take his workshops in Tokyo. And he would have like 30 people jumping around the joint, doing like the craziest, like almost cultish things. And it was super fun. And I couldn't understand half of what he was saying because I just moved. And what was amazing was that it wasn't an audition process, but you had to fill out all this paperwork to get into the class. And he didn't want too many dancers. And he would only take like 1 or 2 choreographers out of 30 people. Like he wanted to have a cross-section of humanity and to have like people dancing. And the results were phenomenal. Like the dancing was so amazing that there's something about how, dancers actually can help non-dancers or beginning dancers dance. And it actually makes the dancers more aware of what they know, and it gives them empathy.
Yeah.
Instead of like this thing, this Foucault dance class where you're all like looking at the teacher who's in charge of your life and comparing yourselves in the mirror and judging your value as a dancer. And it's like, what's your value as a person? Like, where's your humanity level? How are you opening your senses and your ability to communicate with other people?
So do you maintain that philosophy, if not the quotas here at the studio?
I have less selection here than I would in Tokyo, maybe. But yeah, the dancers here are a real mix between, trained professionals who've worked all over the place, who've somehow ended up in Edmonton. Maybe they have a dying grandparent. Maybe they've moved here because they have kids now. Like life changes that can sometimes turn dancers into really interesting people. Just sometimes. And sometimes they already are. But like the mix of people we get here is very changing, and it's very bizarre. Like there's really great dancers in the theater community who are, triple threat people who, for some reason, would occasionally do contemporary dance shows with me instead of musical theater, which I find amazing.
That's exciting. Right?
Yeah. It's like you could be doing dinner theater right now. Richard Lee. And I mean, as far as quotas go, it's more important to me in Edmonton to try to integrate, like the Aboriginal population over time, which, there's not a lot of contemporary Aboriginal dancers in Edmonton, but there's a lot of hip-hop dancers that come from that community. So I think as far as quotas go, that would be a more useful quota. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because everybody's learning, so...
Now let's talk about events. I mean, the event that I've had the pleasure of experiencing is the Dirt Buffet Cabaret, which happened last night in this space. And I had the pleasure of experiencing several different, 6 other acts and then performing myself, which was wonderful. What's the origin of this event?
Well, this is Ben Gordetsky, and I met him when he was training at U of A in the drama department, and now he does a lot of stand-up and comedy work with Rapid Fire Theatre. And he's a very talented mover as well. And he was always interested in Buto as a dancer and improv and combining more physicality. And we'd been doing these salons for, a number of years, and then we got this new space, and I was starting to think about how to do the salons in the space, and he approached me about the Dirt Buffet. And I was like, yeah, try it. And so that was like in May, I think, or April, maybe last year. And, we just figured out how to do it really rough and ready. I was like, here's the formulas, what you got to do, nothing over 10 minutes. Try not to have more than 8 acts or else nobody will get paid enough. And just stuff like that, and just allowing it to happen and evolve. And so now that it's like the 8th one yesterday.
Great.
And it's really got its own energy. And
it seems like some of the philosophy behind it is that it's a free-for-all in terms of taking chances on performers and also their disciplinary choices, allowing people to be a bit weird, a bit experimental with their work.
Yeah, and it seemed like the crowd was really buying into it. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
They were really going along for the ride. Those kind of events to me are like artistic research. So I go to them, really looking for things that are going to impress me in new ways, looking for the unexpected things. Because it's hard to get interdisciplinary people in the same room like that. I don't go to the poetry slams, but when the poetry people come here, it's really interesting.
And what you were speaking about way back when, in the interview, about well, I mean, I would call them general public, but people who aren't necessarily used to seeing this kind of thing, or who have become a part of this community because maybe they do something with their lives that's completely separate, but this is something that they enjoy, and to have those people, interact with me at intermission and thank me and feel this lack of a boundary and real comfort and welcomeness. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, you can't really slip out the back door and go suck your thumb after a performance here.
But also that the audience doesn't have that feeling of hierarchy or anything like that. We're just people in a room sharing art.
Yeah. I think it works really well. I like the format, and it's experimental, and so you see people who, like the stand-up guys, sometimes they're really well-known stand-up guys. I don't know, I don't go to stand-up shows. But when they come here, they'll try something that they've never tried before, that they wouldn't do under, the pressure and expectations of a stand-up show. And so you see people pushing their own boundaries as well in a safe way.
Safe.
Yeah.
It's a very safe environment.
And like our public that's been following us for years is used to being triggered and pushed and watching things that are a bit on the edge. Like I'd say they're pretty sophisticated. And I don't know if they have the, vocabulary to describe what they're seeing all the time. Or they probably do. They probably do better than I do. But they've really gone through a journey if they've been with us for a few years. Because like the Dirt Buffet, I was telling people they should go to it because you'll always see nudity, but it's going to be uncomfortable. And then there's almost always a gross liquid. And you never know where in the show, but it just about... Was there liquid yesterday?
I don't know if there was, but I did hear about a Happy Meal being blended at the last edition and drunk, so...
Wow. Richard Lee.
Amazing. Can you tell me a bit about the other monthly event that takes place here?
The Subarctic Improv and Experimental Arts. And so this is Jen Mesh and Alan Belchidis curating. Allison is a amazing saxophone player, and Jen is a dancer, choreographer, improviser who's relocated from the States. And they've got a lot of music connections. So whereas Ben's connections are more in the theater and comedy realm, the Subarctic is like dance meets all kinds of audio. And then they also, like the painting here, the mural is the visual artist. So it's like audio, dance, and visual artists. And then the idea is that they're improvising together, sometimes alone, sometimes.
Does the cast change from month to month? Or is...
Yeah. And it's longer form. Like there's some 20-minute pieces in that one. Whereas the Dirt Buffet is more like a variety show, boom, 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 cabaret. But they both really stretch the possibilities of live performance. And there's crossover in the crowd, but the crowd is also distinctly different. Yeah. I wish you could stay.
I know, I'm very intrigued. I would like to perhaps talk a bit about, we've covered education, we've covered performance. What about the support that you offer emerging artists? Other than these opportunities to perform, what form does that take?
I don't know. It depends on the person. Like sometimes people are like, hey, do you want to be my mentor? And I'm like, sure. And then we meet, and then they don't listen to anything I say. And so I'm like, well, okay, I guess that's one kind of mentor. Like I'm laid back. And so, but at the same time, I'm really uncompromising. And we were doing artists in residence in the old space because our space was dirt cheap and virtually useless for performance. So it's like we had all this time. So it's like, do you want to do a piece here, have some free space? But we can't really do that here, which I kind of miss because that was like one form of getting things up and going. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the people. Like, people learn to do by doing, and I think people need the freedom to find their own voice and to just do it. And it's nice to have, like, mentors and people that you can check in with. But, like, even when I phone up my mentors and go sit down, it's like, I don't listen to what they say. Like, I'm just using them as a sounding board. I'm not really listening. And yeah, like watching the pieces in Dirt Buffet over a period of time, it's like there's a whole generation of people that are discovering the techniques and voices from the 60s and 70s that were never fully recorded on VHS and or in any way. Like, they were just written down, like Yoko Ono's Cut Piece and things like this are really popular again, and they're being rediscovered. And nothing I can say is going to help a performer figure that out. They have to figure it out for themselves, and their own open approach is what's going to feed the work, I find. I don't know. I started teaching contact again. That's been my way of just kind of, I don't know. I'm very judgmental, so I'm always trying not to pass as much judgment as I feel or think, and to just, like, be more patient and quiet. Because, you know, like dancers, take dancers to a dance show, they're like, blah, blah, blah. I hate this, I hate that.
But have opinions.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, you lose your freshness in your own medium.
Yes.
And so, like, I don't even like going to dance shows very much. I'd rather go to, like, film or visual arts or a music gig, because then I can just enjoy myself and still receive artistic influence. Yeah. It's funny, right? Like, I don't think novelists are like, oh, I love all novels.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to absorb it without analyzing, without being critical, without relating it to everything else that you know about the form.
And I think it's really hard now for young people. I have huge opinions about the education system and how the universities are pumping out half-baked people all the time, and, you know, giving them the impression that there's a job market out there when really there just isn't. And it's more about entrepreneurship and your ability to starve to death and make shit happen by yourself.
Well, that's it. Like, so much of it is by doing. You learn by doing, as you were saying, and that happens after school.
Because, you know, even when you're in school, it's obvious that the people benefiting most are your teachers who are getting this great salary.
Sure.
And it should be free. Like, when I did university dance, it was the cheapest way to take class. And I did the math. It's like, I want to take 3 classes a day, and I want to do this and this. It's like, oh, I better go to university. And the math doesn't work now. And plus, you're spending like 4 years of your life. It's like your prime time. Like, you should be out there just, you know, hitting the stage, doing your stage time. What is it? 10,000 hours.
Was that from the Beatles there?
Yeah, I think that's
how long they spent.
Steven Pinker talks about that. It's a thing in Japan too. It's that you have to spend the time. Like, dojo training is all about just putting in your time. But for dancers, it's not your studio time, it's your stage time that matters. Like, nobody cares if you went to class in the morning. Like, can you bring it at 8 p.m.?
And you're going to need that class so that you can, and so you don't hurt yourself.
Maybe 10 a.m. class doesn't work for you. Mm-hmm. You know, like, it's more important to bring it at 8 p.m. and to be like full on as a performer, and to, like, that's your art.
Again, that goes back to your contradicting ideas of your make myself happy, dancing my contact improv, and create work that somebody's supposed to see. Yeah.
I mean, nobody cares what you do for your self-care. Like, you know, you can drink Slurpees and smoke a joint. I don't care. Like, if I'm watching the show, I'm just watching the show. I don't have all the background. it's like, I know, great performers who take amazing care of themselves, but that's not important to know when you're watching the show.
Sure.
And as far as like them teaching other people, it's like, yeah, self-care. Everybody has their own brand of self-care. Some people, it involves a lot of self-medication, but other people, it involves taking technique class every day. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting over a period of years, just seeing how like some things are important and some things are less important over time.
What would you say, with that in mind in particular, I mean, you're spewing a lot of great advice for a young dancer right now, but what is something that you thought was important that is not, and something vice versa you didn't think was important and is?
Like, honestly, like I spent, like pretty much my whole adult life as a dancer thinking I was fat and that my body was wrong and that I wasn't good enough. And like the whole mentality of looking in a mirror is detrimental to a lot of dance. And I think that a lot of contemporary dance is really based on vanity. And if you look closely at it, it's like, what's the purpose of performing this? Is this like a glorified selfie that I'm performing in front of other people? Or like what do I want to really communicate or share? Mm-hmm. And, like the self-care part, I think is more for yourself and doesn't need to be performed. And you don't need to apologize for it. Like whatever your self-care is your thing. And it should be like your precious little egg. But then the stuff that you share, you should really share. And yeah, my opinions about dance and art changed a lot after I had kids, just because I had less time to spend focused on art. And when I did have time for art, I was really, really, really hardcore about it. And I probably got back into it too quickly instead of just taking the time to breastfeed my baby and not make her cry. I was like, frantically trying to pump and perform. Pump and perform. And
a work in progress.
Yeah, a very long work in progress. But, it's really hard when you're a parent, and it made me be highly selective about my social life and the people that I hung out with. And yeah, I just really restricted everything else that I did so that I could do art. And my kids have this amazing art sense now. Yeah, they're very good critics. And then, yeah, in Japan, the mentality is very different, which influenced me about the difference between amateur and professional there. It's really hard to get funding if you're doing any contemporary art form. So people I was working with were really great artists, but they would have to support their work by working full-time and rehearsing at night in a play school or a rec center. And yeah, doing great work that way. And so when I came back to Canada, it was like, what's everybody complaining about all the time? Like, just do the work. Like, for me, the main thing is the work, and that, there's a million ways you can support yourself in your life and things you can do with your life and your self-care and all that. But, we have to spend a lot of time justifying ourselves to granting bodies and to people who don't even really like art. It's like trying to explain what dance is, like just to get an operating grant. It's like, I could be like digging potatoes right now and it would be more satisfying than grant writing. And I'd probably make more money.
There seems to be a running theme of dualities and integration in yourself and in the community and within art forms. Nothing has to be one thing.
Yeah, Yeah, maybe that's why I'm so conflicted. It's my dualities.
There you go.
All of them.
All of them. What do you see for the future for Mile Zero Dance here in Edmonton and for yourself?
Well, really, Edmonton's undergoing probably the largest dance renaissance I've ever witnessed. Just kidding. No, I mean, it's good. Like, the summers are very amazing. And I'm happy to see more and more site-specific work happening because it really freaks out the audience and it puts dance right in their face. I'm committed to getting dance off the stage as much as possible. I think the stages are sucking us dry and we're losing our humanity as performers by being on stages too much. Because there's only so many times you can break the fourth wall before you're like, what is this wall even doing here? Like, if I always want to break it, why am I in a space that demands it?
Sure.
Right? Like, somehow the spaces really dictate the work. And it's important to question that. It's like, if I believe in community or, bringing a certain type of work to audience, I have to not be in a theater anymore. It's like, too bad. I really like clean spaces and sprung floors, but
you're being pulled in another direction.
Well, yeah, I'm inspired by Min Tanaka, who, he said he doesn't even call what he does buto or dance anymore, and that he likes to go out and dance for unexpected audiences. And I kind of want to be that old man when I grow up. When I grow up, I want to be an old Japanese man dancing for unexpected audiences. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Do you have any last words of wisdom or any last information about Mile Zero that you'd like to talk about before we say goodbye?
Well, just, if people are coming through town, they should drop in and say hi. I'm curating a Dance Crush series, which is like dance I like. So if you have something that would work in a studio environment similar to 303's with very minimal tech, we had Ben Camino's Nudity Desire. It worked really well in here, lengthwise. I think up close personal dance is amazing in a tight venue. And so, looking for work for next year. And people should come visit more. It gets lonely in the West during our Renaissance.
Well, I would be happy to come back. I've been speaking with Gerry Morita here at the Mile Zero Dance Company in Edmonton, Alberta. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Dirty Feet podcast is produced and hosted by
Produit et animé par
Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
We have Mainline Theatre, Montreal Improv Theatre, and Paul Aflalo to thank.
Merci pour le soutien.
Vous pouvez visiter notre site web, écouter les derniers épisodes, lire notre blog, nous aimer sur Facebook et nous suivre sur Twitter.
You can visit our website, listen to past episodes, read our blog, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.
Show us some love and help us spread the word.
Montrez-nous un peu d'amour et aidez-nous à passer le mot.